That's what I'm talking about, son. Get you some of that daggone pie.
Woo-hoo! Looky there. There's your bug-eyed big one right there.
Getting started. We're getting started.
Here's what I'm talking about. Gosh dang gorilla.
Let's go, baby. Straight meat. God, look at that big one.
All right, welcome in, everybody. This is the BAM Pod. I'm your host, Big Ed, and today, we're in this transition where we've got some really good weather. It's finally cooling off a little bit, but that does mean there's going to be some changes to our lakes. So I thought, you know what, let's go out and get a guy who, if you fished a long time ago, there were some guys out there when you heard their name on the list that you knew they were going to be fishing in an event. You got a little, maybe not scared, but you got a little nervous. You're like, darn it, now I got to give up my money to this guy. You know he's going to number, he's going to get a top 10, he's going to be out there. Well, this guy here has done that for his generation for sure. He is one of the top anglers in the West. He is a beast on the water. And so I thought, what a better guy to go out and get on the radio show right now. Talking on this podcast is going to be Mr. Ken Mah. So, Ken, welcome into the show, man. I appreciate it.
Ed, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Anytime I can help out and get some exposure and talk to all the people is a good day. It's a good day.
Well, I've talked about this a little bit, and coming into this, it's like a breath of fresh air around here right now because we got fall is just knocking on the door. We've had some rain, we've had some wind, we've had some cooler days. Finally, we're out of the hundreds for a while. And one of the things that's going to start happening, and I think that people really struggle with it, is the grass is going to start dying off on a lot of our lakes. We have Clear Lake, we've got the Delta, we've got a lot of lakes that are really well known for their grass. We also have a lot that are, not known at all for grass. But I think fishing grass lakes in the transition, then the fall transition especially, where you've got some grasses just dying off, some grasses just doing well. This is a tough time to fish. And as a guy who's won a few boats here and there and won a few tournaments in the fall, especially on Clear Lakes and the Delta and, all that, I figure you'd probably be a good guy and have some pretty good information to share with the folks listening. What do you think about this time of year?
Well, I mean, if we're starting off, we're specifically kind of talking about any lakes that have any type of vegetation, or anything that even collects on the surface. I really like when the days get shorter, and that's been going on now for, about the last 30 days. The days are gradually getting shorter and shorter. Right now, you look up at 7, 10 minutes to 8, and it's almost dark.
Yeah.
So I actually really, really enjoy that when it gets into the fall, because what happens is a place that like Clear Lake and Delta, for instance, obviously on the Delta, the grass, that's the predominant cover that is in that waterway. So even when it dies back some, there's still a lot, and a lot of grass can be intimidating to people. Because there's just miles and miles and literally hundreds of miles of it. So when the days start getting shorter and you start getting that cool morning, where you maybe got to put some lightweight pants on, you definitely got to wear a sweatshirt. When that starts happening and the days getting shorter, the grass will, it starts basically dissipating. It starts dying back. And especially between Delta and especially at Clear Lake, when that grass starts dying back, what I love about it is it really makes it easier as long as you do the work. I never use easy and fishing in the same sentence. So that's a thing of mine. So but it really does make it easier that as the grass kind of dissipates and there's less and less and less of it, well, the fish have less of it to get into, right? So it actually congregates them or brings them to the remaining grass that's left. You know, I had a tournament at Clear Lake, you know, a long while ago, where, you know, it was late November and there was just barely some short grass left. It was before forward facing, and, you know, you had to find it with your 2D, or you had to actually, you know, what I do a lot of times in the fall is I'll have a deep diving crankbait on the deck of my boat.
Okay.
Even if I'm fishing, like a lot of times I'll be fishing like on the north end of Clear Lake in the fall when the water's lower, and let's say the water is anywhere from 4 to up to 9 or even 11 feet, you know, and then prior to forward facing, so I would take a deep diving crankbait, I would throw it out there intentionally to snag grass.
Okay.
You know, and then when I snag the right type of grass with that deep diving crankbait, I'd set it down, and then I would throw, you know, a trap over there. I'd throw a chatter over there. I'd throw a top water over the top of it. You know, it was an old school way, and it still works today, even with forward facing. Sometimes you want to see how healthy the grass is, or if the vegetation has changed a little bit. You know, a lot of times when you have vegetation that, say you have two vegetations that come together, or you have a little bit of hydrilla there, or you have a little bit of coontail mixed in with what I call that long hippie weed. You know, so a lot of times, you know, with the forward facing, you can see the grass, but you can't really see the type of grass.
Okay.
So being able to hook it with your bait and reel it to your boat and really look at the grass and look at the condition that it's in. You know, is it nice and crispy still? Is it, or is it dying and is it all soft? That makes a big difference on lakes like Clear Lake, where you're looking for that remaining bit of really crispy, you know, kind of short grass that those fish will get around. You know, because obviously that type of grass attracts everything. It's a circle of life.
Right. Right. When you're now a little bit, so a little bit of this, when you're looking for grass, one of the things you said in there was that you were looking for maybe the little shorter grass. Does it matter how thick that is? I mean, obviously for fishing, you know, some of the baits you just described, the a rattle trap, even a deep diving crankbait or a crankbait out there or something like trying to fish. Do you care about how thick, how deep I mean, is it just you want the healthiest grass, or are you looking for something that has more to it as far as, you know, hey, I want a big thick grass mat because that way I can get right down the edges of it and work through, or I can rip stuff, you know, throw that cast mat, or not cast mat, that rattle trap out in there, get in there in the weeds and just rip through it, or you want to fish over it, or what is it that you're exactly looking for? I mean, as far as the best, is it just the healthiness of it?
Yeah. So really, I always look at, like I used to be that way. What you're asking me, I used to be that way where I would look. Now, obviously, if you find something that the fish are going to be in, then you want to try to find as much of that as possible.
Right.
So I will say that. But what I was going to say first is what I used to be was, okay, well, I wanted enough grass where I can throw a flipping stick on them, you know, or I wanted enough grass where I could throw top water over them. You know, now what I've learned about myself and just about the fishing is, you know, I fish what's in front of me. Okay, so if I come to a situation where the grass is kind of died back, it's really like kind of low to the bottom, but it's really crispy and thick. Because, you know, like a place like Clear Lake, when you get that really tall, stringy grass, it's real hard to throw like a trap or, you know, an LV or even a chatter, and especially a crankbait, right? Because, you know, you're reeling a chatter or a trap through there, and, you know, it gets caught, and, you know, it's hard to rip free of that 6, 7, 8. Some of that grass is 10, 11 feet long.
Right.
So it makes it a lot of work, and there's times where it gets frustrating, right? Because you're constantly hooking that grass. So I used to always be like, well, I want to look for this or I want to look for that. So basically now what I look at is if I find a pot of fish and the grass is thicker, then I just pick up the right tool to fish that grass in that situation.
Okay.
So
yeah.
yeah, so
Oh, no.
so that's kind of what I look at now, as opposed to saying, okay, I only, like in my early days, I was real bad at this, where all I wanted to do was have a flipping stick in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if the grass was not thick enough for me to put a flipping stick on it, I didn't even bother fishing it.
And
that's,
I mean, and now as you've kind of gone along, you've gotten a little more, I don't want to say mature through it, but your game has gotten better or more complete. Versatility becomes more important to you, is what you're basically saying on this, making sure that you are addressing the I'm struggling to say it. I guess the easiest thing to do is instead of trying to look for one spot, is fish what's right in front of you and fish it the right way. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. And I guess your word versatility is close. I always say I always use the term, you want to fish open enough and trust yourself.
Okay.
And a lot of people, I've had so many lessons where I have failed in fishing, and many of those lessons were because I didn't trust myself. And when you have those failures, so I'll give you an example of not trusting myself. So like when you're in a tournament or you're fishing that day, and if you're fishing multiple days, what happens is because of either long-term history, recent history, or something that maybe just happened. Every angler's mind is a computer that should be always computing data. Okay, so even if somebody tells you something and they tell you the wrong thing, that will hurt your computer when you're fishing. That'll hurt your decisions that you make. If somebody puts a premonition in your mind that they don't give you all the information. So what happens a lot of times is, like, there was a Lucas Oil Championship, for instance, way back. Well, not way back, but back in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 2-pound lead on Lake Mead going into the last day, and the wind shifted and it blew probably 20 to 25 right into my main area.
Wow.
And I sat there and tried to force those fish. Ended up catching one fish, but I ended up forcing those fish. And what was funny, Ed, is that had I just gone around the point and got out of the wind, that later I fished the U.S. Open like 2 months later, right around the point, which was like maybe 300 to 500 yards away from where I thought was my best spot.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up being an area twice as good as I was fishing. And I lean back on those lessons because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to just be like, okay, hey, I found these fish. They're out here in the grass. I'm throwing a trap and a chatter to them. Well, the wind's not going to let me fish right here. So let me trust myself and then go around the corner and, let me go win this $75,000.
Right.
And that's exactly what would have happened. Because I ended up losing to Brian Smith, who was a tremendous fisherman. And, and I only needed like 5.5 pounds to win that tournament.
Wow.
And I ended up weighing one fish for like almost 2 pounds.
Hmm.
You know, and it was a lesson. I mean, I could go on and on, you know, but really, you know, going back to the original question is, you know, anglers need to fish open enough,
right,
you know, and trust yourself. You know? And that's why a lot of anglers, well, I don't say a lot, but some anglers do poorly, even though, let's say, they've had a really good practice. A really good practice, in my opinion, ends up really hurting anglers, because what you caught on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday doesn't always equate to Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
right.
And then you're spending Friday, Saturday, Sunday chasing what you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So so you telling everybody to stop pre-fishing? I'm just kidding. But
well, here, no. What I'm saying is I think that there are times where too much pre-fish will hurt you, because the more you pre-fish and the more prior success that you've had,
right,
okay, usually the more locked in you get. Okay, and then so when it changes on Friday or Saturday, right, which it will change, okay, when it changes, you're going to be slower to adapt, because you have pre-fished for 10 days and you've had 8 days of great success throwing this bait, right? So that data clouds your judgment, right? And then when it clouds your judgment, you're slow to change. And then when you're slow to change, you also don't trust yourself enough to change at that moment, because you get too locked in.
Bass U, folks. Information is pouring over. If you want to learn more about every lake, how to fish, shallow, deep, in between, skipping docks and rocks and cranking, slow wiggling, chatter, smattering, you get it at Bass U. We got the best of the best. If somebody's ever caught a bass on something and perfected the technique, we got you covered. Get on Bass U TV, check it out, sign up, be a member, be part of it, folks. Keep learning. I'm Gerald Swindle. Subscribe to Bass U.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I definitely, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that can put themselves in that position and say, yeah, that's happened to me, because I know it's happened to me. You know, it's you go out, you're like, yeah, I did really good. I know this lake, I got it, and you go out there and go, I don't know what happened to it. It went away. It went away.
I would say that what we just talked about is one of the biggest struggles of competitive angling within anglers that we battle every chance and during every competition.
Yeah.
And even any fishing day, even if you're not competing. Obviously, when you're competing, you know, you're on a time frame, and you know, there's rules and regulations and things. You know, it's not just fun fishing. You know, it's easier to change when you're fun fishing because there's nothing at stake.
Right. Yeah,
right?
and that's a great point. I mean, you go out and it's one of those. I know you can't approach every day a tournament day like a fun fishing day. I know you can't approach it that way, but you've been very successful over the years, to say the least. Is that something that you try to put in your head when you're going out? Is that, you know what, I need to treat this just like it's any other day. I'm going out to catch fish. I'm going out to just read the water, let the fish tell me what I'm going to do, and go from there.
Yeah. So what's helped me the most, you know, fishing the prior defunct Apex event, where there was no practice and there was a 30-day off limits and no information rule. That has taught me to fish in that moment and to trust myself, because you don't have any other choice.
Right.
There's no choice, right? Because you can't practice. You don't know. You know, obviously, what happens on day one, you build on that to day two, and then hopefully to day three. You know, it's just like when I won at Arlington on the Columbia River in the John Day pool. You know, the first day I weighed like 14 pounds, and I was happy with that. Mm-hmm. But each day and I don't know that body of water. I have, like, including the 3 competition days, I've had 5 days on that part of that waterway my entire life. Right. So there were no really preconceived notions, and each day I got better each day. The first day I weighed 14 and change. The second day I weighed like 2150, and then the third day I weighed almost 22 pounds.
Wow.
And that's what happens when you're well, I'll say forced, when you're forced to fish in the moment and just take what's unfolding. I ended up winning that tournament on a frog and a topwater bait. I had no idea I was even going to throw a frog until the end of the second day.
Oh, okay.
And that's how crazy it is. I had a frog tied on, I had a topwater bait tied on, but you have a lot of stuff tied on when you're fishing those apex events, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But you're open. You're kind of looking at stuff, and then you're waiting for stuff to unfold. And as stuff unfolds, like on day 2, for instance, I had a 1 ounce punching rig tied up. It was in my rod locker. I pull up to a Thule patch on the Columbia. Like I said, little to no prior experience, and I'm like, man, that looks really good for a 1 ouncer. Right. So I literally put my power poles down. This is on day 2. I put my power poles down. I dig a 1 ounce rod out. And on my third flip, I catch a 5 1/4. Okay. For the next 2.5 hours, what do you think I did?
I'm guessing you probably looked for punching places.
I went to go flip everything that looked like that for the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
Never, ever, ever got another bite the rest of the tournament.
Probably not that. Yeah. And I'm guessing that's what you're saying right now, is that, yes, in that moment you were open, and yes, you looked at that and said, I should catch those fish there. But at the same time, you then shut your mind off and said, this is what it's going to do to catch fish. This is what it's going to do to win this thing. Even though that was just not the case.
Right. And people should be able to relate to that, because, there's somebody listening right now that throws the same color trap, the same color crankbait.
Right.
They throw it, or the same LV or whatever lake they're on, or the same topwater bait, and they get into what I call a rut. I think, that's one of the things. That's something that I put on my dash every year. Is I put on there. I put a couple of things on there, but the last thing I put is get out of your rut.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we all get into a rut. Right now, I'm not saying you can go out there and just throw open your tackle box and just tie on 100 things, because that's easy to say, harder to do. But I'm just saying, you gotta pay attention to what the fish are telling you, right? Because they're always saying something. But yeah, that was my example of again, of trusting yourself in that moment. Because again, going back to the original thing, it's easy not to. It's so easy not to. And then at the end of the day, you're just like, oh, well, they didn't bite.
And that kind of leads me right back to, where I kind of started this is the time of year, and we get them, we basically get 2 a year, where you get a fall transition, you get a spring transition. And right now we're in the middle of this fall transition. Like I said, grass is dying, things are changing, tules are coming, they're not growing as fast as they were. It's starting to cool down, days are getting shorter, all these things. And when you talk about, trusting yourself and getting out of your own way and letting it come, do you find that this is one of the harder times a year to do that, or is it the easier time? Like, I feel like during, the rest of the year, you got summer, you've got winter, whatever it is, I don't want to say you can get into the same, throw on one bait and go all season long, catching fish on that, but you can get into more of this is the position they're in. But as this change comes, as these things go from colder or from warmer to cooler, and the water changes and the grass goes away and the tulies don't become such a great, place for these fish to be. Do you find this to be an easier time, a harder time, because you're just looking for very specifics? Or is it one of those times when you really have to be open to what these fish have decided to do?
So I usually ask this question. Like I did a seminar at Bass Pro last week for the San Joaquin High School club, and one of the students said, when is your most favorite time to fish? And it's always an easy answer for me, right? And I always say, I go, springtime. And they're like, well, why? I go, because I know, without a doubt, okay, that if I stay shallow in the springtime on any body of water, okay, and that's relative. Shallow is relative, right? So if I'm on Shasta, shallow might be 8 or 10 feet. Right. If I'm on the Delta, it might be 3 or 4 feet, right?
Right.
And the answer I always give is, I know without a doubt that in the springtime, as long as I stay shallow, those fish cannot fight the urge but to come shallow. Right? It's in them. They want to spawn. They got to eat first, and then they want to spawn. So they're coming to me. Okay? So it really takes the guesswork out of, well, do I need to be in 35 feet or do I need to be in 3 feet? Okay? So I know as long as I stay shallow or relatively shallow and get into that transition area, those fish are coming to me. Okay. The second most favorite time, and I use that as an example because it sets up what I'm getting ready to say. The second most favorite time for me to fish is the fall transition. And the reason is because, again, those fish, they sense the days are getting shorter, right? They know winter's coming, right? And they're gonna, the bait typically on any body of water, they start balling up, start getting shallow or shallower, and those fish are gonna feed, right? And they want to eat, right? So, in the summer, like the spawn to post spawn transition is always tricky, and then in the summer they're just summering, right? And some days they may not eat, some days they might eat. But when you start getting into these shorter days, and especially when you get those first, like the early transition can still be tricky. Okay. And what I call early transition here in California it'd be like mid to end of the September, right? Is it going to be an Indian summer where it's going to stay warm, or is it going to really get cold, right? And it really starts getting what I say cold, and you get that morning dew. You definitely got to wear pants and a sweatshirt. You might even have to put a beanie on. When that coldness starts happening in usually a week, or week and a half before Halloween, right?
Right.
And when that happens, and that cold snap really where we get 2, 3, 4 days of cold, cool weather and short days, that's what really triggers and pushes those fish into that transition. And in my opinion, that's when they bite like gangbusters. Okay. That's when you can really, throw like a chrome and blue trap or, a ghost minnow LV, a lot of shad pattern type of vibrating jigs, and right. You can still catch some really, really big ones on top water. Especially like a walking bait. Right. I've caught them on, creeping a buzz bait all the way into November. Stuff like that. I mean, it's a really a fun time to fish. Like if you ask most people at Clear Lake, is the end of September more fun, or is the end of October more fun? And most people will say the end of October.
Yeah, as you really get into those cooler days, and
yeah, you get into those cooler days, those short months, and then they start balling up that bait, and then they start blowing them on the seawalls and on the shallow docks, and and all that other stuff, right? They really get to what I say. They really get to mowing stuff, and they're just gorge. They're just gorging. You catch one and it's so fat, it's freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't get that in the summer. They're eating in the summer,
Right.
and they'll be fat and thick, but in the pre-spawn, they're freaky looking because of their eggs.
Right.
In the fall they're freaky looking because they're just eating, hitch and shad and crawdads and just and they're just eating and eating and eating. They just don't stop.
Just gorging themselves to make sure that they're ready for winter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great approach. That's something that I know that we still probably have, like you just said, towards the end of October. So we're at the beginning of September right now. We've still got another month to go till we get to what you're basically saying is probably one of the better times of year to fish, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at all the championships that we have out here.
Right.
There's a lot of team championships. Historically, there's been a lot of pro-am championships that also happen in the fall, in October and November.
Yeah.
And it's really a great time. I know it gets in the way for some people. It gets in the way of deer season, and then duck season starts, and all that other stuff. But the fishing is really, really good. Going into the fall, and you don't have to deal with on any of our even with the muddleload lakes or Shasta, Oroville, and things like that. When it's still not super cold, you don't have to deal with any of that fog and really, really inclement weather, right? Because that starts happening, in mid-November, and then Thanksgiving shows up and things like that. So,
right.
It's just there's this like 40-day window from, say the beginning of October to, mid-November that it's just really fun here.
Good, because I need to get out and fish to get a little more. With that said, there's a couple things in there that I heard you really talked about, and that's there is that transition coming in, and there is the others, the other sports, I guess, that people do, the other hobbies people have, hunting and that sort of thing, start up. But one of the things you said was the championships, and some of these organizations have started to migrate a little bit more towards championships in the spring. They're going to have them still. What do you feel is, I guess the question is Clear Lake the only place to have a championship? Because I've heard that said so many times in California now. It's like, the only place to have a championship is Clear Lake. If you don't have a Clear Lake, it's just not even worth having a championship. But you mentioned New Maloney's. You mentioned some of the motherlode lakes that are putting out monster fish. They're putting out really good weights. You can have 20-pound days without any problem. You can, or you can have Clear Lake, the Delta. There's so many other places. What do you really feel about that with this change coming up in the fall?
So I guess from a business perspective, I think it's always good for a organization to move their championship around. Everybody always looks at a championship as, quote, a home lake type of deal,
right?
So I think when you move it around, people know that you're going to move it around, and then people will then make decisions. If you go to Maloney's, or if you go to Pedro, or if you go to Oroville, Shasta, Delta, and Clear Lake, and people can make the decisions on what they want to do, and then everybody gets, quote, gets their chance on their home body of water.
Okay.
But to answer your question, the thing about Clear Lake, why Clear Lake is really special, is it fishes so diverse. It's a lake.
I agree.
That it's a lake that if you're used to fishing deep and you like having light line and a spinning rod in your hand. You could go there almost year round, but you could, especially in the fall, you could go there, September through November, and you can fish your strengths, and it's a lake that you can win finesse fishing.
Right.
Because it's been done. The same thing goes for, if you want to go there and stay shallow and you want to power them the whole tournament, you can win, throwing topwater. You can win with a flipping stick. You can win square billing. You can win chatterbaiting. You can win deep cranking. You can win throwing a football head jig. You can win throwing a swim bait. I mean, the lake is very diverse, so that makes it more enjoyable for the customer base to go to a lake, to feel like they have a chance at fishing the way they want to fish, and that they have a chance of winning doing what they want to do.
For nearly 100 years, Grundens has built gear you can trust to keep you fishing no matter the weather conditions. With head-to-toe coverage of high-performance outerwear, sportswear, footwear, and much more, it's no wonder Grundens products are backed by some of the bass fishing's most prominent figures, such as Skeet Reese, Randall Tharp, Adrian Avina, and Jonathan Van Dam, just to name a few. Grundens. We are fishing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can see that and agree with that to an extent. But to bring up something that enough, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I talked to Randy Howell earlier this year, and he was going to be fishing on Gunnersville, a lake he lives right on,
Right.
And there's always been this big stigma. And you said something, and my home water, I can fish my home water. But people lose on their home water time after time after time after time. So if you feel like that, are you stating more? But then you said, everything else, and it's kind of like, so is it people have the opportunity with Clear Lake to take a waterway that's maybe not their home water, but treat it like their home water because it is so diverse?
So, two things there. First thing I want to address is winning on your home lake, any multi-day event, especially, it's hard to win at any 2-day event. It's hard to win any 2-day event. It's even harder to win any 3-day event. And then even harder when, it's in a pro-am format where you have to weigh your own fish.
Right.
Okay. The weight and that, I would say, the 1,100-pound gorilla that is on your shoulders when you're fishing your home water,
right.
Is, that hometown curse.
Yep.
It's real. It's real. I think it's one of the hardest things to do in competitive fishing.
Yeah.
Is to win on your quote home body of water. And it goes back to what I talked about earlier, 15 minutes ago, where there's so much history, there's so much going through your mind. There's been so many successes and so many intricacies that are logged in your computer, and it's hard to let go of all that data in your moment. And that's really what it comes down to, is that you're trying to force something that you've had a decade or 3 decades of success doing on that day. And on that day, that's not what they're on.
Right.
So yeah, I think that is real, like something for me personally, and people may not realize this. Obviously I'm known for the Delta being my home water.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many majors where, I have finished anything but first. My entire career.
Right.
And really in 2021, when I won the Wild West Championship, that was now I had one other smaller like 2-day events and things like that. But like I said, when you're looking at a 3-day event or longer, where you have to catch the fish, you have to catch all 15 fish by yourself. That's just one of the hardest things to do in competitive, in competitive fishing. And and so think about it. In 2021, which was only 3 years ago in 2 months,
right?
That was the first major that I had won on that body of water in like 3 decades.
Wow.
Right. Nobody knows that because they just assume, because I have gratefully have had a lot of success on that body of water.
Right.
Right. But quietly, me and a handful of my friends, that weight was so heavy, and when I finally won what I would call a major, that body of water, that weight was lifted off of me. Like prior to that, you think about it. So I'm known as a Delta person. Okay, so prior to that win, I had won 2 majors on Clear Lake, one on Orville, one at Arlington, one at the After Bay, one at Berryessa. I'm trying to think. I'm missing. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying this, that I had won majors at all these other places. I had won 2 majors at Clear Lake before I even won one on the Delta.
Yeah.
And then when I finally got that one, the internal weight off of my shoulders. I know externally it may not look like that to people, right? Because people might be like, oh well, Ken's in the top 10 again on the Delta. Go figure, right? It's not surprising when you see, Wayne Brazil in the top 10 at Clear Lake. It's not surprising when you see Jeff Michaels and Greg Gutierrez in the top 10 at Lake Shasta.
Right.
It's not surprising to see, Ryan Friend in the top 10 at Orville.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's not even as impressive as when they make the top 10 at the Delta.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that weight, gets lifted, and so going back to your question, I think I believe it's one of the hardest things to do is to win on your home body, any time of year.
Yeah, and that's what I was questioning when you're talking about that, and you're, like I said, with this time of year that you're fishing. It's are the fish biting better? Obviously. I mean, that's what you were just talking about, is this is a great time of year in the next 30 days, get on the water and start fishing, because this is going to be one of those really good times to be out there and catch a lot of good fish. But with the championships coming up and so many of them focused on Clear Lake, and the way you presented it was that it's such a diverse lake, and such a lake that I feel like what I took from what you said was that it is one of those lakes that the reason they have it there and the reason it is considered one of the top championship lakes is because of how diverse it is, especially this time of year, where you can, like you said, you want to throw a swim bait, throw a swim bait. You want to throw a drop shot, throw a drop shot. You want to drag around a shaky edge, or whatever, do it, because the fish will cooperate and will eat. And you can take a lake that is nothing like your home lake. Like, it's not a Shasta, it's not an Orville, it's not a New Maloney's. There's no grass in those lakes that to really think about. And you can change it into and still treat that lake like one of those lakes that you would consider your home lake. And that's what I kind of took from what you said, and I think that kind of explains why so many have championships there.
Bass Angler Magazine is your guide to better bass fishing. Bass Angler is dedicated to helping you catch more and bigger bass no matter what time of year or where you live. This is not your ordinary fishing magazine. Every issue is jam-packed with 30-plus articles from the world's best bass anglers. Bass Angler Magazine is available at bassanglermag.com Tackle Warehouse, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, Gander Mountain, Walmart, and better tackle shops everywhere. Bass Angler also makes a great gift for any angler. Get Bass Angler today and start catching more bass tomorrow. Visit bassanglermag.com or your favorite tackle shop. This is not your ordinary fishing magazine. bassanglermag.com.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that, like if your strong suit is, like I said, fishing deep, or your strong suit is fishing shallow, or you want a deep crank, you want a shallow crank, whatever your strength is, just about, I would say, no matter where you're from, whatever your strength is, it's the type of lake where you could show up, in the fall, you can start off and primarily fish your strength. And you can absolutely wax everybody that weekend.
Okay.
Doing what you like to do, because it's like, the lake is almost like, I'd say there's like probably 4 diversities in that lake. And what I mean by that is, you have like Cache Creek and Rodman, right? So if you like to fish kind of river, delta, a little bit of current type of stuff, you can go into those 2 sloughs and you can get away from everybody, right? Then you got the north end, which is predominantly shallower, a lot of docks, a lot more grass grows. There's a lot more tules up on the north end, right? So that's like a second diversity.
Right.
Then you go into mid-lake. You go into mid-lake where the rock piles start. There's still some grass mixed in, still some tules, still some flats and grass, right? And then the fourth diversity is once you get like into the narrows and down into the south end, a lot less grass grows. The water is deeper in that part of the lake. A lot of deeper docks. A lot of deep rocks, where you can throw a crankbait and never catch a piece of grass. And you can throw topwater down there around those docks. You can, you could throw A-rigs on that lake and win.
Yeah.
So really, when I look at Clear Lake, it's almost like there's 4 diversities or 4 different lakes all wrapped into one lake. Like in the fall,
yeah,
you're not gonna take a deep diving crankbait and come to the Delta and be competitive.
Right.
You're not. It's just like same thing with a drop shot, right? You're not going to throw around a drop shot in the fall on the Delta and be competitive. Now, could it happen on a weekend? Yeah, it could happen, right? Because like the Delta still got them, right? It's still like right now, it's still taking 17 to 20 and a half pounds, to win team tournaments.
Wow.
So any lake that has them like that, you put 2 and 3 magical, the right days together, and it can still happen. That's what's great about those, lakes. Mm-hmm. Conversely, even though I always go to the Mudload Lakes, Shasta and Clear Lake, I always go to those lakes with a flipping stick in my boat. Yeah. Right? Because you never know when you come up to a piece of wood or some laydowns and things like that. But the chances of me flipping on Clear Lake on Shasta, Oroville, Pedro, Maloney's, Comanche for 3 days and winning a major event there is going to be very, very rare. I never want to say impossible because you just never know what can happen.
That's true.
So, but it would be very rare for that to happen.
Okay.
But if you take both those techniques to Clear Lake in the fall, and somebody says, "Oh, I won drop shot in 25 feet of water," you just shrug your shoulders and be like, "Yeah, I can see that happening."
Yeah.
And if I say, "Oh yeah, I won flipping in a foot of water," you'd shrug your shoulders and be like, "Yeah, I can see that happening." But if I tell you I won in a foot of water flipping on Lake Shasta for 3 days, you'd call me a liar.
Of course.
Right? You'd be like, no way that happened.
But you've done it, right?
I've tried it. I've definitely tried it.
Yeah. And that's, as we get in here, you've mentioned a few things here bait wise that I'm pretty intrigued by, but is this I don't want to say great. I mean, I think we feel like summer's always been, that quote unquote best time for topwater. But you mentioned topwater a lot during this. Is the fall I want to say good, but I want to say great. Is it a great time to go out and fish for topwater fish looking for that bigger bite?
It really is, and I think the issue that people, the number one thing is that they don't stick with it. When I say throw topwater, on any of those lakes, Shasta, Oroville, all the mudload lakes, and especially Delta Clear Lake, people always tell me like, "Oh, I threw topwater. I'm like, well, how long did you throw it? Well, I threw it for the first hour. Okay, so in an 8-hour day, you threw it at 8 of the day.
Nice.
And as you get later in the year, later and later, it takes more dedication to really throw a topwater. Like if I tell you I threw anything in a tournament, like an 8-hour tournament, if I said, well, man, what'd you catch, man? Well, I primarily caught them, on a trap, but I caught 2 on a topwater, and I threw the snot out of it, right? That means if I told you I threw a certain bait hard, in my estimation, I'm telling you I threw it anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day. And I may throw it for 4 to 6 hours for 1 to hopefully 3 of the right bites.
Okay.
Right? It takes that type of dedication. Now, of course, you might have magical days.
Right.
But as the days get shorter, the water gets cooler, you don't get the quantity of bites really diminishes, but the quality of bites then go up, increases.
Right. And that's and what I was going to say is, and that's a great point, because I think as these days get going, and a lot of people, and I'm not, there's always the top 10 that's there and they understand what you're talking about and the way that they will approach, the way they will attack a lake, and understand that, what, I may only get 5 bites today or 6. I might not have one of those summer days where I catch 35 or 40 fish in this time of year, but the 5 that I got were all 3+ to 5 pounders. And that's what it took. That's what you're going to be on, depending on what body of water you're on. I mean, if you're catching 3 pounders at, Clear Lake, you're probably not going to be in the top 10, but, but if you catch 5 pounders, you'll be right there. But it's one of those things that this time of year, giving up the amount of time that you just talked about, 4 hours, 5 hours to one specific bait, a Zara spook, a whopper popper, a buzz bait, something like that. And all of those, imitating shad, imitating fish. That's what you're talking about with what it's going to take. And I know that you can't predict or tell people how to win. You've been doing it yourself for a long time, and you can't tell people how to win. You can point them in the right direction, but they have to do the work. But to give that much dedication, do you really feel like that's what it takes to win these tournaments?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always a level of risk, and what people have to fight is, there's always 2 ways to get there. Let's say you have a target weight of 18 pounds a day. Well, if you go out and you're doing whatever, you're doing, something you enjoy doing, and let's say you catch 5 really nice ones and you have 16 pounds and it's, 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, then it should be a lot easier for you to pick up a topwater and throw it for the next 4 hours, if that's what you feel is going to produce that difference maker.
Right.
Okay. The other way of getting there is You know, and I always use, you know, I'm a lot this way, but I always use Nick Savucci. You know, he's a really good friend of mine. I always use him as the epitome of, you know, Nick, you know, in my opinion, one of the best topwater anglers that we have in our entire region. You know, it's something he just enjoys and loves, genuinely loves doing. What, you know, and when we're saying he'll do it for 8 hours and he'll get 5 bites, and if they're, as long as they're the right ones, that's what he'll do.
Yeah.
You know, and like when he won the U.S. Open, for example, you know, I remember talking to him. It was like 1:30 with a 3 o'clock weigh-in. He had like 3 fish. You know, and he's still throwing topwater. And he started throwing topwater at 6:30 in the morning. Right? So a lot of times it takes that type of dedication, but it's also the fearlessness of, okay, well, I can weigh 3 fish today.
Yeah.
And he's 100% okay with it. You know, so
I think that's a great word to use, the fearlessness of it all, because in this tournament stuff and this the way you're going out there is you can't have that in the back of your head that I've got to catch 5. I mean, you do, but you know, you do have to catch 5 most of the time. I mean, you're probably not going to win or cash a check on a consistent basis if you're only catching 2 or 3, but you know, to go at that knowing that, hey, I can catch 3 fish today and I'm okay with it. I don't like it, but it's maybe all I catch, and I'm risking the amount of money I put down for whatever to go at this. I feel like that's something that, you know, a lot of guys forget about or aren't willing to do. It's like, I've got to keep catching fish. And I see that. And I talked to Ishman Earl about this one time, and he said that too. He said, it's so hard to get people to put that one little bait that they're catching 2-pounders on consistently down and go, you can't win with those. You have to catch something else. You have to change and do something else. You have to, like you said, you got to pick up the topwater. You got to pick up something that's going to produce that better fish. And I give a lot of props to those guys that are throwing those great big swim baits, because they're doing that from sun up to sundown. They're throwing a bait that, yes, they know that if they catch a fish, it's probably not going to be a 1.5 pound fish. But they're also risking all of it if they catch one 9-pounder. Great, you got a 9-pounder. You finished 38th, you know. But that word fearless, that is really a part of this event, a part of this, and I think it transitions into this time of year too, because there is that window that you might not catch the fish you think you're going to catch this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, and then there's a balance, right? Because, you know, you got to go off a feel, and that's where I started with, you know, you got to trust yourself.
Right.
But again, you know, if your target weighs 18 and, you know, like I said, you catch 16 early, it's a lot easier to
make that upgrade.
Well, no, it's a lot easier to take those risks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if, you know, if 18 is your target and it's 18, and that's what's going to get you there to win. And, you know, you have 16 already and you spend 3 or 4 hours throwing top one and it doesn't happen, right? It's okay because you already have 16, so you're only 2 pounds behind. So tomorrow, if you catch 20, you're where you need to be. And 20 is manageable if 18 is your target.
Right.
Right? So, you know, conversely, if it's 12:30 with a 3 o'clock weigh-in and you only have 3 fish, it's a lot harder to be fearless. It's a lot harder to be dedicated in that situation.
Yeah. Oh, I agree fully.
I
agree fully. I think you're, you know, that's words of wisdom right there from some guy who's done it. So that's, you know, that's great to hear. You know, we got about 5 minutes left here, and we're going to go on this. But I'd like to talk to you just quick, just this last kind of 5 minutes. You know, I'd like to, you know, let people know how to get a hold of you, that sort of thing too. But What do you think coming up with this upcoming year? We took a major hit this year, and I'd love to hear your opinion. You were involved in a lot of this stuff that went down, and a lot of these things. You had, big wins, you had all that, but with the defunct circuit, our circuit coming up, the BAM circuit coming up, that sort of thing. What is your kind of take on what's going on out here in the West Coast right now? Have we taken a step back, or are we going to be just fine?
No, I think we've taken a step back. I mean, it's from a personal standpoint, I had a lot of the wind knocked out of my sails, from Wild West going under and the way that it went under. I invested, my reputation, my time, and my energy, into Wild West Bass Trail and Apex. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to digress, but
no,
but I think a lot of anglers feel how I feel. You have those events basically jerked out from underneath you. There's a lot of trust that was lost. And with that, there's a lot of cautiousness that comes from all the anglers involved, but there's also cautiousness from anglers who are on the sidelines who are considering fishing. So yeah, and for me personally, there was a lot of, it's easier to talk about now that we've had time to process it, but there was a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment, like I said, and that has, hurt my individual motivation, moving into 24. Mm-hmm. I think that looking at what Alan Gray and MLS are trying to put together, and as active as he has been, looking at Billy at One Bass, adding an event, I think that his decision to put a open at the end of January at Lake Shasta is a great decision. Wild West for 8-7 years has had great success and has drawn record boats during that time of the year there. So I think there's some positive things that the other companies that have great reputations and have good standing in the industry and long standing industry that they're doing.
Right.
Then that brings us to Mark and Bam. With Mark, Mark has always had, he's had the magazine, I think, or the calendar / magazine, I think, for 17 years, I believe.
Correct.
So when you have somebody that understands marketing, that is, selling ads and doing podcasts and things like that, and he does have a 17-year track history in dealing with people in the industry. I think that positions him in a very unique way to parlay those relationships into the trail. I think that if anybody was going to pick up the pieces, he was definitely one of the people that were in the industry that could pick up some of those pieces and and as an angler and now a business owner, he can look at it uniquely and say, okay, I didn't like the way how this stuff was going.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to change it. I always think, I look at a lot of the social media things that he's been putting out, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but it amazes me how critical and negative some people are. I mean, there's a lot of people that are positive.
Yeah.
And they're chomping at the bit to fish. But it also amazes me, how pessimistic and sometimes negative people are. And I stopped to think about this. And I said this to a couple of anglers. I'm like, this man has laid out on the outside looking in up to a few $100,000. Right? I mean, he's bought equipment. He's putting together staff, the marketing, the graphics, the wraps, just wrapping everything, just the whole bit. He hired you as the MC. I mean, that's not free.
It's not.
So here it is. This man has laid out, at least 100 to two. I don't know, at least 100 to $200,000 or $300,000.
Right.
Hasn't even collected a dime yet. You think about that. Hasn't even collected a dime of any angler's money yet.
Yeah.
And he's working his tail off to bring something that's needed in our industry, right? I mean, there's a vacuum and a void left by Wild West Bass Trail, and especially the Pro Tour. If nothing else, Apex showed our region that something like that is needed in our region.
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but me, to answer your question, I'm where I'm at, being kind of personally hurt and the wind being taken out of my sails.
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I love where his mind's at. I love where his motivation's at.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known Mark for over 20 years, and I trust him as a person.
Yeah.
So, but there's still a big part of me is like kind of wait and see, because I was probably the biggest cheerleader for what Wild West and Apex stood for. And, because I loved it. I loved everything about it. And, and I had 8 years back when Gary Dobbins owned it,
right,
of helping shape that tour, those tours.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that was, and honestly, that was a rumor that I had heard out there was, and you can snub it right now or make it, that you were going to be the one who picked that up and did something out there. That you were going to be you were going to be the owner of it. You were going to try to do something yourself.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'll say that, during the transition, when Wild West said that they were selling, I mean, I had 7 people call me and ask me if I wanted to partner with them and buy it. Like that happened. During the 2 to 4 week period, and there was 7 different people.
Right.
Hey, do you want to get together, and buy this and this and that and the other? And every time I was like, no. Right? I was like, no. And I listened,
right.
one of the anglers who's a business person, just like Mark, who's a successful business person, he had the best plan, and he said, hey, look, I think you and I can do this. You're going to have to run it. You can't fish. Right? And I told him, I said, listen, I go, I worked 29 years. I go, I retired last year so I can fish and do whatever I want, not work.
Right.
And the way I am about something is when I believe in something, I got one speed. Right? And I have one focus. And that is to do the best I can do for that one speed and that one focus. And I know that about myself.
Right.
And there's no part of me that, when you work, and this, if you're a fisherman and you start working in the industry, or, an angler, and you start working in the industry, fishing becomes less fun.
Yep.
Everything about it becomes less fun.
Yep.
Right. And I have blessingly had fishing to give me a relief from my prior employment.
Right.
It's given me so much of a relief that I would never, ever want to feel like I'm working in it. So yeah, I mean, there was no part of me ever that truly considered buying it. Like I said, right. I was approached and called by 7 different people, and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I listened to every person. well, what's your plan? Well, I think we can do it for this and do it for that. And some of the conversations, it was one conversation. Other conversations, it was multiple conversations. But it never came down to a place where, I sat down at the table and tried to buy it.
Yeah. Well,
because I just simply, I'm sorry. I simply knew that I did not want to work in the fishing industry because it's a fun sucker. It would be a complete fun sucker.
Yeah. No, and I get, and I get that. That's your passion.
Angler.
Your passion on that side of it is the fishing side of it. And there's nothing wrong to say anything wrong with that. And I think that's a great way to go is, hey, if this is what you truly love, then do that. Because that's going to keep, like you said, that's going to be your relief. That's going to be your release. That's going to be your way out of daily stress or life stress or whatever. And that's what people use fishing for a lot. And being able to go out there, be at the top of your game and, look at fishing and say, this is something I'm going to go out, I'm going to have fun today, or I'm going to be at this tournament and I'm going to focus and try to win. And there's something just exhilarating about that. And when you start adding work to that, you start making this industry your boss, because that's what it ends up being, is it ends up being your boss. You may work for it, you may own it, whatever. It's your boss, and you work for everybody else in this industry now. But it is a tough one. It really is a tough one to be in.
It is. And here's the thing. When you own your own, everybody says, oh, gosh, you're so, quote, lucky, right? You own your own business. You can do whatever the heck you want to do. The problem with small business owners is, there's a lot of lifestyle things about it that are great, but you're never off. Your phone is never off. When you own a small business, it could be Sunday at 5 o'clock. It could be Sunday at 8 p.m. You can't afford to not answer the phone.
Yep.
And my thing is when I'm at a tournament, I don't want a phone call from a tournament, from one of my staff running a tournament,
right,
asking me about a question about off limits, asking me about where's this in the trailer when I'm trying to win this tournament. And then it would be a huge conflict. Like Mark
right,
has made the decision, and he has said, publicly, he's not fishing his event.
Nope.
Right?
Yep.
I'm not done fishing, so there's no way I would own it, because the only way to do it properly, right, is to not fish your events. You're either a business owner or you're a fisherman. Which one are you? You can't be both.
Can't be both. Yeah.
Right. You can't be both. Well, you shouldn't be both.
Yeah.
There's always a conflict or a question there.
It's been tried in the past. People have tried to be both. I fish my tournaments. It never turns out well. Never has, and in my opinion, it never will. So I think Mark's decision to not do it is correct. It's the correct decision. Right. Don't be a part of it on the fishing side of it. Go fish other stuff, but you can't be a part of yours.
Yeah. Right. And it's just simple. Are you a businessman or are you a fisherman?
Yep. Yeah.
Right? Pick what you want to be. If you want to be a fisherman, then be a fisherman. If you want to make money with the magazine, you want to make money with the tournament trail, and you want to build something in the industry that will help your legacy, then that's what you're going to do.
Right.
So, and that's what stopped me all along, right? I mean, maybe 8, 9, 10 years down the road, when I'm done with the competitive nature of how I am, I would always say you never know.
Right.
Right. But for now, I'm an angler. That's where my love and my passion is, and that's what I want to continue doing.
All right. Well, on that note, why don't you let some people know, how they get a hold of you or watch what you're doing, or just stay in touch with Ken Mah. Because you're not a hard guy to get a hold of. You're not a hard guy to be out there, but people should, listening right now, maybe on the other side of the country, they could what? I liked what that guy had to say. Let's watch him a little bit. Tell him how to do that.
Yeah, so on Instagram and Facebook, I'm at Ken Mah, Kenmah Promotions. On both those platforms. I'm reachable on, also my personal Facebook page is Ken Mah. So people can reach out to me that way on social media, and I'm always active. And, I love being a part of the industry. And no matter what happens, that's part of the industry and part of the joy that nothing, no one, or no circumstance will ever get taken away from me or out of me. It's just something I enjoy, genuinely enjoy.
All right, man. Well, thanks again. This is that important time of year, I think, and you really nailed it here on it's going to get good in another month or so as it goes. And I just really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your info. You're definitely one of the top guys out here in the West. You've been that way for a while now. I think you took the reins away from some of the old school guys, and you're definitely going to be the legend out here for a long time. And I appreciate you coming on and doing this, man.
Blessed. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot, and tune back in, because in a couple weeks we're going to have another great angler on here, and we'll go from there. So thanks for tuning in.